Hi, I'm Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times. We're doing an endorsement interview this morning with Rick Niemeyer and Chris Shepard. Both of them are Republicans running for Indiana State Senate in District 6. Why don't we begin with discussing your qualifications for office. Chris, why don't you begin with this one?
Talking to the camera or to you?
Either one.
My name is Chris Shepard. I'm a candidate for Indiana State Senate, 6th District, in the Republican primary on May 6th. I'm a lawyer by profession. I moved to St. John when I was 12. I live there now. I practice a lot of criminal defense and business disputes and contracts and things like that. But the work I'm proudest of is my work in First Amendment freedom of religion, First Amendment freedom of speech, and Second Amendment right to bear arms cases. I've had some significant achievements in those areas, and I'm very proud of that work. The bottom line is I'm running to shrink government and expand and protect personal liberty. I think that great nations are born when conditions combine to wipe the slate clean of government interference, bureaucracy, and layers of government. And I think as time goes on, layers of government accumulate, taxes accumulate, and the slate gets so filled up again that men aren't free to pursue their own interests. And I'd like to help us get back to basics on that.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, my name's Rick Niemeyer. I'm a candidate for Senate in the 6th District also. My background is I'm a small business owner since I got out of high school. I've been elected township trustee and assessor in my area. I was county councilman, and I'm currently state representative in my district. My experience and my background of starting at the local level in township government and moving up to county and state government was experience that I think I wish a lot of elected officials had, because it gives you the one-on-one conversations with what people think of what's going on in their home communities, and you're able to take that to a broader field and try to take those things and those decisions that make them be able to stay in business and fulfill a good life. I've been in agriculture a long time. Been in that field as far as my business. I run a weekly livestock and hay auction since the 70s. I'm a real estate broker and a state representative. That's where my qualifications are. I've lived in the district all my life. I voted Republican all my life in every primary since I turned 18. And I'm really thrilled about this opportunity to serve the 6th District in that Senate race, and look forward to it.
Okay. Well, one of the things that dominated this legislative session was the constitutional amendment, or the proposed constitutional amendment on same-sex marriages. What do you think, Rick?
Well, I supported the legislation for the amendment. It should have went on the ballot. Let the people decide on a referendum what they think when you do your work back home in your district. There was some division in it. My beliefs are that I do not recognize same-sex marriage, but let the people decide. It was a tough issue. I think eventually the Supreme Court's going to make that decision for us. Wish they would have went ahead and put it on the ballot this fall so that people could have had a decision on this, but as it turned out, they changed the legislation, a little bit of the wording in the legislation. It got kicked back for another session. It looks like in 2016 it could go back on if nothing has happened. So I supported the amendment. I supported the amendment going, the constitutional question going on the ballot.
Okay.
I support traditional marriage between a man and woman. I think it's the best way to raise productive and happy citizens. Having said that, it's making a constitutional amendment to tell people of the same sex that they can't get married, not my top priority. I think our energy could be best directed elsewhere, especially when you consider the fact that it's already legal. I'm not sure what a constitutional amendment is going to accomplish, especially if it's really vulnerable to a constitutional attack and being struck down by the Supreme Court. You've got a short legislative session in Indiana, and there's just a short amount of time to get a lot of things done. So I believe in traditional marriage. I support it. Not my top priority, amending the Constitution to prohibit it, though.
Okay. Why don't we talk about what your top legislative goals would be? I mean, like what bills would you want to file first thing? Chris, let's begin with you.
So I'm really interested in education. I think getting the government, minimizing its role in education is really important. I'm a big believer in the voucher program. I like the idea of drawing on free market solutions of freedom, competition, and accountability to fix what's wrong with education. I am also dedicated to reducing the tax burden on people. I think things have gotten way out of hand. I think that the problem with a bloated bureaucracy is the taxes it takes to maintain them, and these taxes have an enormous influence on our lives, from daily decisions to life's major decisions. I want to simplify government, and I want to thereby reduce the amount of taxes it takes to support them. Probably the only area that I'm really for more government involvement in is infrastructure. I think this is one of government's legitimate functions where it should play a bigger role, and I think we ought to audit every dime of public spending and take the savings and put it into improving our roads, improving our rail, improving our infrastructure to the point where it's a boon to business and we're not stuck in traffic jams, because that's coming.
Okay. Rick?
Well, some of my priorities were, and some of them that happened the last 2 years in the session down there, was grassroots government, making sure the locals have the ability to make decisions that affects their citizens and not mandate on them decisions coming from the state or the federal. The states' rights right now have a big thing going on with federal government. I think some of their state rights have been compromised. They don't want the federal government involved in their state government. They want to make decisions. We got to be very careful on the state level, do the same thing to the locals out there. Give them the tools to make decisions, but let them make those decisions with the May statutes that they can make a difference in the area where they want to spend their money, where they want to spend their income tax money, their county option tax money, what they want to do with it. They want to create taxes locally and they think it's something they need to do. That's something they have to look at. We can't do that on a state level. We can't mandate to them what they must do, because we're fighting a losing battle there. We're looking for states' rights, but so we can't do the same thing to the locals. I was on the transportation committee downstate. We did put 37% funding back in transportation for 14 and 15. As you know, the transportation fund was paying for pensions and stuff when the things got tough in 2007, 8, and 9. That money was all restored to the local tax and the gasoline tax. So now there was 37% more going to local roads the next 2 years than was there. We're still falling behind. The gasoline tax is starting to fall behind because of the economic vehicles we have out there. You pay X amount of dollars per gallon, and so we were able to put a 1% of the sales tax money does go to the transportation now that we did not have before. That legislation passed. And the idea of streamlining government and eliminating some offices is no more than making government bigger. You got to have that local control. You got to have people making decisions locally back home. And when you streamline government or eliminate elected officials, sometimes all you're doing is making government bigger.
Okay, why don't we talk about the role of public education? Chris, you were just saying that you want to minimize government's role in education. What do you see as the government's role in public schools?
So traditionally, government would create a school, and it's there. It's bound by certain rules, and it performs or it doesn't. It's there. It exists. With the charter school program, there's more freedom to the local school to innovate. There's more local control of these schools to reward teacher innovation, incentivize performance. There's less regulations, and it's on a per charter or per contract basis. If that school doesn't live up to its promises, it loses its charter. It can't go forward. And what I like about that is that kind of free market idea of accountability, of performance. I really don't have a lot of trust for government controlling everything. I think there's a lot of genius in the free market, and I think we ought to draw on that strength. So charter schools and the voucher program is a way of doing that. Every kid now brings their education funding that their tax dollars would otherwise pay for to whatever school they're in. It gives parents the choice to choose a school, and then schools compete against each other. Whether it's public, whether it's non-public, that competition drives up performance.
Okay, Rick?
One thing I've seen in education the last few years is when the state took over the operation budget of all schools. So that means their operating money is coming through a state formula. It's based on per student, based on whether you're in the federal program with the kids getting student lunches and stuff, and it varies from anywhere from $4,500 to $7,500 a student. So when these charter schools come up, they have the ability to go in there, issue those vouchers, and that money that was going to that local school will now go to the charter school, and so the money follows the student. I'm okay. I supported 80-90% of the charter stuff. We've got to be careful, though, that we don't take funding away from our local schools and make it very tough on them when we start letting charter schools expanding the program. I want to see what happens with charter schools right now. We expanded the program a little more this time. It's basically based on low income now, where you're going to get a voucher from. Not everybody can get a voucher. It's low income only. I think it's great for the urban schools. I think it's great for cities that have a 30% dropout in their students, that don't finish school. They're single parents. This gives those people an option. They can't move from the area, but it gives them an option to send their children to a school, a charter school, and see if they can get the education they need to go on to more schooling. I think the good schools that are out there, which is a lot of them, I don't think they're going to see run on their school system with charter schools and vouchers coming out of their formula. I think they're going to be okay as long as, and it puts that little bit of competition out there that they got to perform both levels. Okay, the charter schools got to perform just like the regular schools do, and if you don't perform and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, that's going to hurt you. And I think these good school systems are going to be fine, and I think it gives an option down the road. I support the voucher system at this time, but I'm not so sure about expanding till we give it a few years to see how it works. And I don't want these charter schools that cherry pick. It's all about how your school does, what your school is grading out. So I want to make sure that they're on a level playing field with the public schools. They got to take all mentally challenged students, and they don't have an option on this stuff. Charter schools don't have an option whether they want to take them or not and get the funding for them. So we got to keep a level playing field, and I'm okay with so far what's going on in the state of Indiana.
Sticking with the subject of education, we saw Indiana get rid of Common Core this year. What role does the state play in setting state standards, and what needs to be done to keep Indiana competitive with the rest of the country in terms of educating our young people and creating a future workforce?
So my fiance was actually a former public school teacher. She's now a medical school student. And from my understanding of Common Core, everyone likes to badmouth Common Core, and I understand why. It was a well-intentioned program. It didn't achieve the results that it intended, and it was kind of difficult to implement, because if you're teaching the Gettysburg Address, you don't want some prepackaged plan telling you not to read it like a speech, or not to make reference to it being a memorial service. That's the problem with Common Core. Teacher in the classroom needs some freedom to innovate. I like the idea of common standards. I like the idea of measuring accountability with a set of standards that is uniform and demanding on the students. I don't like the idea of putting these teachers on the front lines in straitjackets. It doesn't work. I'm for freedom in the schools, and I think that's the way you get the best results.
The Common Core thing, when I got elected to session, I didn't know a lot about it in 2012. I got to really get involved in it a lot. I support the Indiana drawing their own educational Common Core, or whatever they want to call it, for their kids and their students. Because when they first signed on to this, the Republicans were part of it. There's 45 states signed on to Common Core, and they have a lot of good central values that we need to look at throughout this country to make sure we have some of the same values of other states. But every state's different, and every state should have the ability to make changes to that Common Core where they think that's best for their state. I was very proud of the session last time. We put a tremendous amount of education into vocational training. We're going to start partnering with businesses out there and companies, trying to get these kids that want to go on the vocational side of it, give them training so they can find a job. There's a lot of jobs available right now in Indiana that the students and people that are graduating don't have the ability to do because they don't have the training to do it. So this gives them that ability, because most companies, when I was growing up, you could go to work in the steel mills and stuff and they would train you. These companies nowadays, they want you ready to go when you sign in and they hire you. So they're starting to do a lot of partnering. I think that's the way Indiana should go. I'm glad we're redoing Common Core. Probably 60-70% of the Common Core is going to be tied to the federal standard, whatever states are doing. But the other stuff, we need to look at what's good for Indiana. We need to make those local decisions here.
Okay. Let's go on to making Indiana's business climate where it ought to be. You know, what do you think of where we are and where it should be? Rick, let's start with you.
Okay. I think we've done a lot for small businesses the last few years in this session. We're trying to make it, Indiana is one of the top states in the nation as far as bringing businesses in, trying to make it an advantage for them to come in and hire and operate in our state with our workman's comp laws and our liability stuff is better than a lot of states. But we got to do more, but we got to be careful that we don't hurt other taxpayers and wage earners out there with what we're doing for small business. We've done a lot for them. We eliminated the inventory tax in '08. We had a plan with that. We increased the sales tax 1% to take care of that inventory. That inventory tax was a bad tax, and that was hurting Indiana. And now that is gone. Now we're looking at eliminating the Schedule A personal property tax. What we passed in the session was a scale down, giving up to the locals if they want to do something with it. They can do a 20-year abatement and some things they can do locally. We did not mandate it from the state that they must eliminate that tax. That's in a study over the summer. We got to be very careful when we shift one tax to another. It's going to hurt somebody else usually, because like Lake County, for example, 17% of their base is personal property tax. So you got to be careful just eliminating, because they're going to replace it with probably adding 0.5% and 1% on the county income tax to offset it. So we've done a lot for small businesses. We got to get the regulations off their back. We got to get government off their back. We can't mandate all these things they must do, because they don't have the ability to pay some of their workers like big companies do, and unions and think they're a small business, they're not union, they've got an overhead. You have good and bad times in small businesses. They got to have the flexibility to run their business. If it's always more regulation on regulation for these businesses, we're going to lose the backbone of this country and our major employer if we don't do something. And I think the state of Indiana realized that a few years ago, and they have worked that way, and that's why Indiana is at where it's at right now.
Okay.
I'm a small businessman myself. I created a law practice and a law firm from the ground up. I know how to maximize productivity. I know how to create a business. I know how to root out waste. As far as government's role, I think the best thing government can do for business is get out of the way. And that means getting out of the way as far as taxes. I understand that the legislature has given counties the option to eliminate the tax. I call for eliminating it totally. I think people are sick of these cosmetic fixes. I think that with something as harmful as a business property tax that compels you to pay a tax on equipment that you've already bought and compels you to pay a tax on that property every year, I think it needs to be totally eradicated. And so I'm for getting rid of that totally. As far as what government can do besides getting out of the way, the best thing government can do for business is creating world-class infrastructure. That's it.
So if you're against paying taxes on property that you already owned, what about the property tax that homeowners and all property owners, all real estate owners pay?
Well, they're a necessary evil, right? But I think that this is one thing that we should eliminate. Does it mean that we should eliminate all taxes? No. We do need some. But philosophically, I am for stripping government down to its leanest and most efficient form, so that the taxes that we do have to pay are minimized, so that we can use that money to live our lives and take care of our families and for other things other than supporting our government.
So what should be cut then? if you're going to eliminate these taxes, you're going to eliminate revenues, you need to balance the budget. What gets cut?
So there is a study that out of Ball State that says that 422 million in annual savings could be realized by cutting the waste out of government. And the other thing is this: when you cut taxes, you raise the tax base, and the idea is that the revenue from that increased business activity is going to lift wages. It's going to lift revenue in other areas and make up for that shortfall.
Ray, your thoughts on that question?
Well, the property tax issue is a tough issue. I mean, the government has worked on those in Indiana very strongly the last few years with the tax caps on the real estate, the homestead credits they've been giving, and the 1% and 2% and 3%. That has helped. So I think the homeowners have been helped a lot in the last few years through the legislature in Indiana. So now we're looking at business taxes, and we have. All these taxes really amount to a usage tax. You live in a house, you own the ground, you're paying tax to use that as your place of residence. You own it, but it's a tax that and same with business, personal property tax and stuff. It's a usage tax. Those are tough taxes, and there's government waste out there that have to be looked at. I think Indiana has looked at it very strongly. Is there other waste there right now? Absolutely. Is there waste in the county? Absolutely. There's stuff that can be looked at. But it's getting looked at more now than it ever has because of what's going on in this state and in this area. So I think that waste is going to be weeded out as time goes. You're never going to eliminate all the waste. It's almost impossible. But you need revenue to work with. I think there's been some protection out there. I think one area that we need to look at very strongly is all these abatements and stuff that are going on. It makes me a little disgusted sometimes when companies move into an area and they're given a tax abatement for personal property and real estate in an area, and you have some of these companies been there 20 and 30 and 40 years in that taxing district that never get an abatement. They're still paying on the same full tax they have. So I think we need to look at that program. These locals need to look at it, what they're doing to the schools in those areas when they give those big abatements out, because the school system is never really talked to these abatements. It's a city or town's decision or a county's decision. So I think we need to look at that abatement program a little bit and make sure that every business out there is getting a fair shot at it, instead of just the ones that are moving in and trying to wine and dine to get them in here.
So when you figure out, we've got the business climate that we want. What metrics do you use do you recommend that we use to figure out that we've got that we're getting our money's worth, our return on that investment? Rick, let's begin with you.
Well, you got to look at what a business is bringing economically to your area, employment that's bringing into your area. And again, when you talk about these abatements, there's got to be a reason you're giving this abatement. It's got to be bringing in some economic growth to your area. We know it's going to give you a little economic growth in your tax base, but are you preventing jobs? Are you bringing a product that people are manufacturing that could create money and create revenue in your area? That's what you need to look at in these abatements. I think when they first started, abatements were basically set up and TIF areas were for blighted areas that needed help. And all of a sudden now there's all kinds of TIFs and abatements out there that cities and towns are using. I'm not saying it's wrong. I think they got to be very careful with them. But I think we can give that climate out locally and get back to a level playing field for everyone, that you're going to be protected. Because you look at business tax, they're in that 2% and 3% cap, but they have nothing to come off their assessed value. They get to the assessed value, that's where their cap's at. You got property and homesteaded property where they get down to a certain level, then you put that 1% on it. That 2% and 3% you're not. So there's another avenue there that, again, I think there's been a lot done with homeowners the last 3 or 4 years in this state. I think they're protected. Nobody likes to pay property taxes. Everybody thinks their property taxes are too high. We got a yearly reassessment going on now. A lot of people don't know there's a secular reassessment goes on in this state. Every year, 25% of your properties in every county are reassessed. And then you hit the cycle the next 4 years. And you got the trending going on. So there's a lot of areas that they can raise assessments and do things. People got to be very careful with that. But I think they just got to make the climate fair for everyone and make sure that businesses, homeowners, and everybody are on a fair. And you're gonna create something that's going to benefit your area whatever you do. And that's where the local control comes back in. These local officials got to be able to make those decisions, and they're held responsible for them. The only thing different about this, the locals doing it, they're responsible. If you don't like what they're doing, you have ability to do something about it. If it's on a state or a federal level, you're basically done.
Well, as far as metrics for measuring economic activity and whether we're getting what we need to out of it, I would say the first is the number of jobs, not only absolute number, but the growth over time. That's an obvious one. Quality of jobs, as measured by the income and as measured by the type of work involved. And third, I would say that the propensity of the job to acclimate itself for this incredibly fast rate of change that we're seeing in the world today. I mean, things are changing overnight. Are these jobs things that are going to stand the test of time, right? And I think those are the metrics that you have to look at.
Okay. Indiana's going into the bicentennial in 2 years. Where do you want Indiana to be at that point?
I want it to be the freest country or the freest state in the nation, in the strongest nation in the world. I want it to be the Indiana that I know and love, that I grew up in, that is a welcoming, hospitable place for people to come here and pursue their interests, and not have to be crushed by an oppressive government, as we're seeing in other states right now.
Okay.
I'd like the state to be visualized throughout the country as a state that offers educational universities that give good education, a great business climate, and a great place to move and live there. Not just to bring your business there, but to move there and creating jobs where we don't keep losing a lot of our Hoosiers to other states and other companies that because we can't provide the jobs to them. I think the training has to be here. We want to keep everybody at home as we can. And and Indiana has that image right now. It started, and Indiana needs to go forward with that image. And there's a lot to do yet, but we have to keep that where it's at. Indiana is a very sound financial state, one of the best in the nation. But doesn't mean we suffered to do that. I mean, there's a lot of services and infrastructure stuff that got put on hold for quite a few years because of that kickback we had, and now we're coming into a little better time. We need to make sure that we make this a climate that people want to come here and live here and make it their home.
The Regional Development Authority is up for reauthorization of state funding. Where do you stand?
I don't know enough about that issue. This is for the
Northwest Indiana Regional Development Authority. The state gave it a 10-year authorization. And kicked in dues of $8 million a year, was it? So now it's up for reauthorization.
As applies to the rail project, or this is just for it as it is as it stands?
Well, let's take that as both. Yeah. Where do you stand on the RDA, and where do you stand on the rail expansion? To
your first question, I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently about it. The first thing I would do, if elected, would be to sit down with and this goes for the rail too, sit down with members of the business community and sit down with the affected residents and listen to their concerns and take a thoughtful approach and look at it from my philosophical view. My feeling is that, my initial feeling is that a rail to Chicago from Dyer could bring in some...
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I think that is our timer. We're out of time. Let's finish with this one last question.
Sure.
You want to start your answer again?
Okay.
Thanks.
Right. So my feeling is that as for the rail from Dyer to Chicago, I would sit down with members of the business community. I would sit down with residents who would be affected by it, and I'd listen to their concerns. I would approach it from my philosophical view, and I wouldn't vote yes until I was absolutely satisfied. My initial thoughts, though, are that a rail to Chicago could be beneficial. There's some high-paying jobs there that it could give people in Indiana access to, and it could bring commerce into the district from Chicago. So that's my initial ideas on the rail.
Okay, Rick?
My thoughts on the RDA is that they've been around for a while. I haven't agreed with all their project, the Regional Development Authority. I think they need to branch out to the southern part of each county, LaPorte, Porter, and Lake County. They've done a lot in the northern end. I understand the Lake Michigan corridor, that they got federal money matched in for some of their projects. They had up there Marquette Park and Wolf Lake and in Portage. What I do like about the RDA, they're very transparent. You can see where their money goes, whether you agree with it or not. I think Bill Hanna's a good director. The mass transit issue, I'm for anybody that does a study, and it seems like that community wants it. Munster right now is looking like they want to go forward with it. Dyer's a little fuzzy right on Dyer's thing. Lowell in the South County area, where I represent, now they're talking a 9 to 10 year period before they can bring that down to us. And they need to talk to us. They need to come down. They need to branch out and have conversations, because all we've ever heard was that they're going to bring the rail line to Valparaiso and Lowell down the line somewhere. So we need to talk locally with people, because I don't know where they're at. We're growing very steadily in our area without a rail. Can we take the big hit of a rail with the infrastructure we've got now? Very difficult. To run a rail, they got to bring infrastructure with it, and I don't know if that's possible with the funding mechanism they have. But next year in the session, if I'm down there, the RDA will be something I look at very strongly. They helped fund the Regional Busing Authority for a while, and that didn't work. Lake County's number one problem in Lake County is that every time you throw money up, everybody wants a piece of it. Until they decide they want to get their act together, these cities and towns, and run a mass transit thing, it'll work. But when you got Gary, Hammond, and East Chicago, and everybody else trying to do their own thing and trying to get some of the money, it's probably never going to work, and that's why I think the RBA didn't work through the RDA. So I'm going to look very strong at the RDA. I think the RDA is probably the best thing we have transparent-wise to see what happens with money. And I think the General Assembly likes that idea also, looking to find out what happens to the money instead of just giving it to all the cities and towns, and then we don't know what happens to it. So.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have, I'm afraid. I'm Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times, with Rick Niemeyer and Chris Shepard, Robert Blaskowitz, assistant managing editor. Thank you for viewing.